So tough act to follow.
A great act to follow.
Right?
I'm inspired. I hope everyone else here is inspired.
Indeed. So you are relatively new to Microsoft. You've had a very diverse background. Why did you go to Microsoft in order to take on this role of Chief Sustainability Officer?
Well, I think the last presentation was a great tee-up as to the kind of impact and the scalable impact that companies can have, that individuals can have. And so I've had the privilege, as you noted, to have a pretty professionally diverse background. I was in policy, technology, investment, business. And the opportunity that Microsoft presents is to actually bring all those streams of effort together as an investor, as a policymaker, a diplomat, really figuring out how Microsoft can use its position with its customers and partners to deliver really scalable change, not just within our own operations and what we can do as a global leader in the technology space, but frankly, leveraging the work of all of our partners and our customers to deliver outsized impact for the world. And so it just was an incredible opportunity that I feel so privileged to be able to join and be a part of a company that is at the forefront of trying to use technology to solve some of the most challenging global problems.
So what are your priorities in terms of the sustainability division? Where are you putting your effort?
So I think I put in 3 categories. The first is getting our house in order and meeting our ambitious commitments. We set in 2020 pretty ambitious sustainability commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030 and protect more land than we use in our direct operations. So first and foremost is to make sure that we as Microsoft are on track to go from pledges to progress. The second key focus is our customer and partner journey. There's many in the room here today and probably listening in on the live stream. And they are such a critical part of the Microsoft ecosystem. Working with them is what helps us deliver this outsized impact, and partnering with them on different applications and uses using Microsoft technologies to scale their own sustainability journey. And I think the third area of work for us is really the enabling environment and the conditions that are required for companies like Microsoft and others to actually work with governments, nonprofits, academics, to help them on their journey so that the environment that we're in, whether it's scaling renewable energy in key countries around the world, decarbonizing the grid, those types of solutions require a really strong enabling environment. And how does Microsoft show up in the world with our partners to deliver that kind of scalable impact? So those are sort of the 3 spheres of influence, or at least priorities, if you will, that we're focused on for this year.
We were talking last night about how the interoperability between companies is so important, that in order to solve this problem, you need to track not only what you're doing, but what all of your partners are doing to look at the entire stream. Can you just talk a little bit about the challenges and sort of setting that up?
Of course. So, we're all on a sustainability journey, and those who are not, we welcome you to get on the sustainability journey. I think the latest statistic was, there's over 4,000 companies that have set a net zero or a climate pledge or a climate commitment. So with all of those companies, how are we working together as we move from pledges to progress? What does that take? For us, the first and sort of foundational component to it is carbon measurement. Where the carbon data is coming from, and I had a great conversation last night with others who are also talking about how are we bringing in our very disaggregated carbon data from all different streams across what we call scopes 1, 2, and 3. How are we first assembling reliable access to carbon data so we can frankly measure and monitor what we're doing so that we can create plans to actually reduce those going forward. So Microsoft launched the Carbon Call last year with other partners, and this is really focused on how do we set standards and work on standards for interoperability of carbon tracking, carbon accountability, carbon data. This we think is really important. It's a foundational part. Policymakers from around the world continue to work on their own domestic efforts and global efforts that affect companies on how we measure and monitor our carbon. So that's sort of first and foremost is really working with other companies to share best practices, share learnings, share what we can count, what we can't count, where we need more technology. I think Amanda talked about, again, just the vital role that technology and data play in that. And that's one way we've been working with a lot with our customers, is really thinking about how do we get smarter and improve. And Microsoft has a growth mindset. It's one of our key pillars, if you will, of our way we operate. So deploying that with our customers and partners of how do we think about that when it comes to the very foundational issue to this kind of planetary challenge, which is carbon accounting.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's evolved from an issue of activism to now a very basic accounting problem of how do we, same way we track our revenues, you track your costs. This is a cost that has never been accounted for in the past. and we're having to stand that up, and there's not a lot of precedent for it. And a little uncertainty about like even what department inside the company should be managing it, what government departments should be involved. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
So this is one where, I think this is, in particular where we're seeing this have a lot of interest around companies is around, for businesses like ours and others, is around the Scope 3 emissions, if you will. So that's, outside of our direct operations, the Scope 3 is what is like a shared journey for all of us. And how are we working with our supply chain and suppliers on helping them get cleaner access to renewable power, manufacturing sites that are powered by this, and really connecting them to renewable energy opportunities in the supply chain themselves so that they themselves clean up their own operations. And that's a key area for us that we've been really thinking through is how are we working with our supply chain and how are we partnering with others on their supply chain. Someone's Scope 3 emissions is someone else's Scope 1 and Scope 2. So really taking that world view and that interconnected view on this particular issue. And then talking to governments to say, what are the things that we can do? What are the things that we are working towards doing and developing? Microsoft has a solution in this front called the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. And this is just one of the applications of, again, what is the platform that we can use working with customers and partners to bring together data in a clear way that you can then report on it, measure it, and track it. And it's been exciting to hear from other people in this room and others, frankly, in various events that I've done, tell me about their solution set and how they're trying to get this done, because this is really the crux of the issue. And governments, as they decide where to cite this, where to put it, it really helps if those who have to report and do it share what we are doing so that they can help better understand where this sits.
Maybe talk a little bit about some of the technologies that you've built and developed at Microsoft that you're using with partners to actually address sustainability.
So, this is our journey includes a range of our commitments, and so I'd say a couple of the tools that we've been using and deploying that I get really excited about is one is we're really trying to invest in innovation and invest in technologies that will help both us and our customers meet the challenges of the future. So Microsoft has a climate innovation fund. It's $1 billion investment fund that really is motivated by a few core principles. One is delivering climate positive impact. 2 is ensuring equity is built into the way we make our investments. 3 is investing in technologies and solutions that help both Microsoft but also our customers. And the 4th is accelerating markets around the world. So an area where the CIF has invested in has been around carbon removal. Carbon removal, I think, is a really incredible space. We heard both in the very opening video of today, most recently, the most recent speaker. Carbon removal is so critical. The IPCC has talked about the importance of it. So Microsoft has taken a stand in actually investing in creating that market around carbon removal. We've been the largest purchasers of carbon removal last year, and we're excited to work with other companies to help them stand up carbon removal and invest in this space. It's going to be required not just for our business to meet our targets, but frankly, so many other companies around the world are going to need to be investing in carbon removal to hit their own goals. So we've been sharing our learnings. We've been publishing a lot of white papers detailing in great detail our lessons learned of carbon removal, and encourage others to join us on the carbon removal journey, because making a market that currently doesn't fully exist, the standards around carbon removal aren't set in stone yet. This is just a rapidly evolving space, and for Microsoft to use the platform that we have to encourage policymakers to have a better understanding of the removal market, to encourage other companies to put in place high integrity standards for removal, so that, again, we can do what science is telling and screaming at us to do, which is reduce emissions and remove the rest.
It's interesting. It really is creating a partnership across different companies too, where you're not competing with other CSOs. You're actually working together and trying to find a common way forward. It's very unbusinesslike. It's very anti-competitive in a lot of ways. But I think it's crucial for addressing that issue. I think sort of in Microsoft's DNA, it's always been about interoperability and enterprise scale. It's sort of built into the company. Do you think that's an advantage, and how do you see that playing in the sustainability space, that mindset?
So before going to the White House, I was in a private equity firm, and we had launched a climate technology fund. And this comment you made strikes me quite a bit, because I remember we were working with other climate technology venture companies. And in the climate tech VC world, you're very open book about the deals you're looking at. You don't anonymize them as Project V or Project C. It's here are the 4 companies we're looking at, and and I remember some of my colleagues at the time were saying, wait, we're going to actually share our deal flow? It's like, yes, we're going to share our deal flow. And I think that's a great example of how differentiated the climate technology community is compared to maybe other types of industries. Climate change is, again, as Bill noted in his opening comments, it is an existential threat to our planet, and it has to be a collective effort. It has to be an all hands on deck, all stakeholders coming together. So climate is unique in that perspective, where it really is about, it's fundamental to partnership, it's fundamental to collaborate. It's not a go on your own. As I noted, Scope 3 is the majority of Microsoft's own emissions, which is a collaborative effort. We need the world.
Do we need to define Scope 3? Does everybody know what Scope 3 is in here?
Can we call on someone to answer what Scope 3 is?
That's a real test. Yeah,
maybe
we should define it.
It's basically Scope 3 emissions is the emissions that come from your embodied carbon. It's not your direct operations, but it's what is embodied into your own operations of what you're doing. So this is a key part of, it's your supply chain, your suppliers, where your products are coming from, how it's used in the world as well. So it's an area where, with Scope 1 and 2, you have direct control over that. It's what you've built, where you operate, where you buy your energy from. This is the one that's one step removed from that. But it's so important because it has companies asking questions of their supply chain. It's having companies asking their partners to go on the sustainability journey, because that's so critical to our own footprint and the commitments we've made. So that's been a key part of that.
We're going to go into a break after this session, so I want to open it up and see if anybody's got questions in the audience or comments.
And maybe they can define Scope.
Yeah, and you'll also have to define Scope 3.
It's a give and take. It'll be a back and forth Q&A. I'm just kidding.
This is my Scope 3 quiz? No.
Yes.
I did want to
can you say who you're with?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm Michael Gold. I'm here representing Emerald Technology Ventures. Actually, you're one of the investors.
Power Force.
But right. Yeah, in our industrial fund. So I did want to ask about what Bill McKibben raised on the financing of fossil fuels. And he actually did call it Microsoft by name. Of course, Microsoft is not the only company that has money in a bank. But I am curious how Microsoft is leveraging its power and its influence to sort of change what you called the enabling environment from the financing perspective in particular.
Thanks. Are we doing one at a time?
We could do 2. There
Great.
you go.
So it's a great question. It's a really important one. That is something that's so important to the way Microsoft thinks about our position in the world. Large corporations play an important role in shaping the environment that we're in. They have a large role in playing when it comes to climate commitments and partners around the world. On the investment front in particular, this is where Microsoft's actually putting our own balance sheet to work. That's why we created the Climate Innovation Fund. It's $1 billion fund where we're proactively investing in climate solutions of today and tomorrow. It's really important as to, again, part of our mission as Microsoft is to empower every person, every customer, every organization on the planet to do more. And how are we working throughout our ecosystem to actually do that has been really critical. And again, it's really about where we make our investments, where we're putting that to work, and how that's helping to actually advance our sustainability commitments. And my role in particular is really about the ones we have at home and those with our customers and our partners.
How do you look at those investments? Do you see them as loss leaders, like you're making this investment for sustainability goals and to further those ends? But I mean, the truth of the matter is a lot of these companies are going to do very well in the climate tech space. There's markets that are forming. Do you think that those investments are going to be profitable and help the company grow?
So throughout my career, I think I've always been driven by the fact that I do believe investing in sustainability and advancing that is the triple bottom line, as some would say, right? It's people, planet, and profit, and that is all one ecosystem, that those all actually do come together. And so for Microsoft, I actually think it's the way we've been thinking about it is actually investing in nascent markets and creating markets where those don't exist, but will be required and needed according to what science is telling us for 2030 and 2050, and frankly, by the 2100 end of century goals that we need to be making. And so part of what Microsoft has done is used our platform and our investments to, and our technology prowess, frankly, to invest in accelerating those markets. So one area is in carbon removal through investments in companies like Heirloom or Climeworks, being early purchasers of direct air capture. We've joined the First Movers Coalition, And so by its title, one can imagine what it's about. It's about who are the first movers in various sectors. It includes sustainable aviation, green steel through investments like companies like Boston Metal. So it's really taking, how do you leverage our investments, our technology expertise, our knowledge to demonstrate where the markets are going to be needed, where we want to see those markets come into shape, and how can we help invest in them because we need them ready by the time our commitments come into force, which is in 2030.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're going to talk a little bit more about investing and strategies in the afternoon, but I mean, the time horizon for a lot of these investments is just different than what most people are used to. But you see company after company lining up and saying, no, we're going to start thinking, we're going to make a 20-year plan, we're going to make a 30-year plan, because that's also the scale of the commitments that they've made. So it's interesting to see that happen. I think we got a question up front.
Yes, I did.
We got a mic that will come down. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Joyce Silver. I do social media and activism on the Voice of Joyce. And I am very concerned. I'm pleased that corporations are taking the initiative. However, we're putting $1 trillion at least in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry through government. And we're doing years ago, we were doing only about $28 billion into agricultural subsidies. Now, it seems to me that when you want change, top down, bottom up, how are we addressing policy at the highest level of government on the federal, state, and local level? And how are we breaking through the political parties and kind of disrupting the chain between corporate money and government funding so that we can really have a War Production Act bill that passes and gets us to move quicker than we're moving right now?
Yeah, it's almost a setup for an IRA type of question, where we just had this victory, and is it big? Is it a big enough step, and will it fundamentally change the dynamic?
So a previous role that I just left was I was in the White House working for President Biden on climate and energy security issues, and so. Speaking as someone who recently left at a very senior position in the U.S. government, advancing very ambitious programs on climate change, on environmental justice, what I could say is the partnership between governments and corporations continues to strengthen day by day, minute by minute. You can look at it, you can measure progress in different ways. You can measure it with corporations coming to UN climate conferences with meaningful and concrete actions and announcements, and then showing up each year being accountable to those, like what Microsoft has done before and other companies do as well. We could also see the importance of where companies show up in policy environments and in policy engagement. So for a company like Microsoft, policy is obviously a key pillar to the way we operate and where we use our voice and where we show up and engage. The Inflation Reduction Act I believe is a critical milestone and a game changer when it comes to setting a policy signal. A game changer because you think about the knock-on effects that IRA is having with other countries stepping up and putting in place their own versions of an Inflation Reduction Act type of bill to spur critical minerals, to spur EV adoption, to spur manufacturing and investment. So for me, the way I think about change is how does policy set foundational rules like disclosure rules? How does policy accelerate change by providing subsidies, frankly, to benefit key nascent areas, carbon removal, direct air capture, electric vehicle, charging infrastructure adoption. And we're finally in a world where we do have that. The Inflation Reduction Act is hundreds of billions of dollars in US government support for this industry that we haven't seen at that scale. To your point about time scale, it includes 10-year tax credit extensions that, again, we hadn't seen to give companies and investors and developers security of what that time frame looks like going forward. And based on that, companies like Microsoft and others have investments in companies through the Climate Innovation Fund and otherwise that are benefiting from this policy tailwind to help them accelerate their growth and their business. So I'm bullish on the policy environment, one, because we've had this, I've sort of been a part of two really important watershed moments. One is the Paris Agreement, which isn't a policy per se, but it's governments coming together to say where directionally the world is headed to rapidly try to tackle climate change by keeping the world to 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. And this next moment, which is the US government stepping up and saying, we are passing a watershed climate legislation to demonstrate where we're headed. And in both instances, the rest of the world has also moved or stepped up or accelerated their action. And that's a kind of policy engagement that gets me really excited because it does set a market signal, it does move companies, it does move stakeholders towards it. I mean, I think we're maybe out of time, but I think I would just comment on this one that all being said, we have to move faster, we have to accelerate our progress, and we continue to need to treat this issue with incredible urgency. We are certainly not done. And for Microsoft, we set our commitments in 2020. We're only 3 years into our journey, but 2030 is coming quickly, and we are quickly working hard to make sure that we are making progress towards those targets as fast as we can. But we really need partners from around the world, governments, nonprofits, other stakeholders to join us. So I've been really excited about the way some of the conversations have been flowing to date. And I know you'll get farther into the Inflation Reduction Act later today, and again, much more detailed deep dive. But for us, we are really excited to see policy progress, but no more needs to come.
Great. Melanie, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been great.
Thanks so much.